guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be reviewing the NATASHA Denona eyeshadows, and no BS, honest review about them. Now, if you haven't heard the name NATASHA Denona recently, then you are probably living under a rock, because NATASHA Denona is an extremely hyped up brand in beauty right now. And the big reason for that is that they have a $240 eyeshadow palette, which is like, so much money. And not only does she have a $240 eyeshadow palette, people have been raving about this left, right, and center all over the internet. So naturally, I had to try out these shadows. Before you get too excited though, no, I did not splurge on the big $240 palette. Actually, almost like $300 Canadian, I believe. I bought a couple of these smaller 5 shadow palettes so I could test out the formula and see, because I am just simply not a person who can spend $300 on eyeshadows sight unseen without ever having felt them or swatched them in person. I just can't do it. And I know a lot of people would never ever spend that money on makeup in general, and that is okay. I totally understand that. So I have 2 of these little 5 eyeshadow palettes, and I will be doing swatches at the end, and I'm just doing my review based off of what I've seen from the formula from these 2 palettes basically. I really wanted to provide a really in-depth, comprehensive review of these palettes for the people out there who are kind of unsure. I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but I know people aren't always so trusting when people are like sent the product for free or whatever. Paid for these with my own money. No one sent them to me. No one's paying me to make this video, obviously. But anyways, let's jump into the review. So starting off, these palettes are $48 USD, which is about $63 Canadian at the moment. There is 13 different options available on the NATASHA Denona website. I have palette number 08 and palette number 02, which like I said, I'll be doing swatches later on. So let's talk size and value and what you are actually getting for your money with this product. So the total kind of gram amount that you get for these palettes is 12.5 grams of eyeshadow. They are full-size eyeshadows, and the NATASHA Denona eyeshadows do retail from $25 to $29 individually depending on the formula. So it's about $9.60 per eyeshadow in this. So looking at it from that standpoint, it is a pretty good value. I think with the larger palettes it's like $8 per shadow or something like that, especially since other high-end brands eyeshadows typically range from $20 to $30. It's pretty much on par, to be honest, especially for the amount of product you do get. So for packaging, there's nothing really wrong with the packaging. It's just kind of like a clear and white, kind of like sturdier acrylic. I feel like they are like well made and everything. I'd feel comfortable traveling with these and not worrying about them. With that being said though, when you get into this kind of price range for smaller like palettes like quads and things like that, I feel like people are naturally going to expect a slightly more luxe packaging. Like, to be honest, there's nothing about this to me that screams like $60 eyeshadow palette, if you know what I mean. I think when we see price tags like this, we immediately think like YSL, Tom Ford, like really luxe brands, but we have to remember, I think, that for all intensive purposes, NATASHA Denona is an indie brand. They're not like a super high-end luxe brand. They have high-end price tags, but they're really just like a brand new makeup brand that just kind of popped up. The thing I do like about the packaging is that it is clear, so if you have a few of these palettes, you can easily identify which one you're looking for if you're going through your makeup drawers. One thing that I find kind of weird though is when you open it up, there's like a little empty slot here as if it comes with a brush or something like that, but it doesn't actually come with anything. So I think that's kind of weird. I think it's probably just to like bulk up the packaging a little bit. So one thing that I've noticed from watching reviews on the bigger palettes and taking a look at these online and just the ones that I own is that for me personally, none of these palettes really give me all the shadows I need to do a completed look. And I know this is totally going to come down to personal preference, but for me personally, to do a really nice eyeshadow look, not just like a simple throw it on kind of makeup look, you know what I mean? I need those matte shades. I need a nice matte brow bone highlight. I need some blending shades, my transition, everything like that. I don't like doing like a metallic or like satin kind of look all over the lid. It's just not my style really. And even looking at the 28 pan shadow palettes, they only have 4 to 5 matte shades at the very most. And then looking at all of the 5 eyeshadow palettes, they have either like 1 or 0 matte shades in them. They're mostly metallic, mostly like the pearlized kind of finish. I realize there's only so much you can do with 5 eyeshadows, but especially for the large ones, it's like, why wouldn't they put some more mattes in there and more blending shades? I just find that kind of odd. So for me personally, these are shadow palettes that I will always have to reach for something else. Like I'll have to use my Tarte lip palette or something like that to get those solid mattes that I need. So that's a slight downfall. It's not a deal breaker at all for me, but it's just something to be aware of, I feel, especially if you want to like travel with these. I probably wouldn't bring these to travel with for that reason, to be honest. And another thing that I find kind of weird, this is mostly just for this one palette, which is the palette 08, but I feel like the shades in here just like aren't at all cohesive. Some of the other palettes tie together a little bit better, but I find this one just so bizarre because you get these kind of like warmer peachy shades, but then you get like two kind of like khaki olive green colors and then this like really silvery cool tone taupe. It's just very bizarre. I can't like ever see myself pairing all of these eyeshadows together. If you know me, you probably know that I mostly wanted this palette for the shadow in the middle anyway. So naturally, before ordering these, I watched a ton of review videos. For a while there, it felt like every big YouTuber that I was subscribed to was posting a review on this. And basically from the way they swatch and the way they look on camera and other people's videos, I was expecting that these would be like the most buttery, silky smooth eyeshadows I had ever felt and just like have a super phenomenal texture. I thought they would feel like the Becca Shimmering Skin Perfectors, like when I actually touch them. So I was really surprised to see that they're actually quite gritty in texture, which I'm not totally sure, but I know talc is one of the main ingredients in these, which I don't really have anything against talc. I know it can be like an irritant and everything, and it's kind of like a cheap filler ingredient, but I think that might be from the talc. It gives it that kind of roughness. I was just expecting like super creamy, like don't even feel like powder type eyeshadows, kind of like the Makeup Forever Artist shadows, like the more metallic finish, that kind of like gel kind of feel. That's what I was expecting from these. So I'm not gonna lie, I was a little bit disappointed when I touched them and they were just kind of like rough. The only exception is the one matte shade in this one palette that I have here. This one's really silky smooth to the touch, but it's not that pigmented. Their metallic and like satin and pearlized kind of finishes are really where they shine. And so to me, it kind of makes sense that they don't do a lot of mattes, because for me, these are definitely palettes that I reach for when I just want like one or two shadows to use like as my lid color and my kind of like accent to my entire look. Let's talk application, because of course you can have a shadow that swatches beautifully and looks beautifully on your like hand or arm or whatever, but if they don't apply well, they're really not that great. And to be honest, I have run into a few issues with applying these. The first one is that because they have that kind of grittier texture, I find them a little bit hard to pick up with a brush. The brush has to be like super ultra dense to pack it onto my lid, or I find I do get quite a bit of fallout. Matte shade is fine with a brush. I do still get a little bit of fallout when I'm using that one matte shade to like build up my crease and everything, but for the most part the mattes apply pretty well. Like I said, that color, as you'll see in the swatches, is a little bit more sheer compared to the more metallic finishes, but it still builds up well. It just takes a little bit of time and just needs a little bit more work. But yeah, lots of fallout when I use brushes, so I have found that the better way to apply them is to actually use your fingers, which is kind of nice, but it's also kind of a downfall as well, because I mean, applying shadows with your fingers is really easy. You don't need a lot of tools or anything like that, but you also lose a certain amount of precision that you would get with a brush. So that's kind of a bummer. I just don't get a lot of color payoff when I'm using a brush. Even using it on top of my Too Faced Shadow Insurance, it isn't dense enough to really pack on that color. And like I said, I experience a ton of fallout, which for me, fallout isn't a huge deal. I just kind of like flick it off with like a brush and I just go on my way basically. But I know some people, fallout is like a big deal breaker. The last kind of negative thing I want to mention, and I think this goes back to the talc once again kind of being an eye irritant, is that when I use them on my inner corner and a little bit gets in my tear duct, it's really irritating for probably like 10 to 15 seconds, which isn't a huge deal, but it does kind of irritate my eyes and sting a little bit. And I think once again that's from the gritty texture. Like, I really love this shade for an inner corner highlight, and that's what I use today. I still use it even though it kind of irritates my eyes a little bit. Yeah, that's just something to be aware of. I personally don't experience any kind of other irritation from the talc in these eyeshadows, and I have extremely sensitive eyes, so it's going to be kind of a personal case by case kind of basis. Now that I've kind of covered the negative things, I do want to talk a little bit positive about them. First is that these shadows are really pigmented. Like, I'll take one of these here, just kind of dip my finger in it, and I swatch it there. It's kind of like once you have them on your lid and once you figured out how to get the pigment from them when you applied them, they're really easy to work with and really easy to blend. In terms of wear time, they stay on perfectly fine. Like, I always use eye primer every day and they don't fade or like wear off or anything throughout the day, in my personal opinion. So to kind of summarize, I feel like where these eyeshadows really shine once again is with the more metallic finishes. I would really only recommend these palettes if there is one that really stands out to you, that's kind of all like the metallic shades, and you want a palette that you can use just for those like pop of color, not pop of color, but just like those like main focus of your look kind of like lid colors. You can see why they don't do a ton of mattes, because their mattes aren't really anything to write home about. They're kind of sheer and they're kind of patchy and a little bit powdery and a little bit too soft. But the metallic finishes, even with the few issues I had, wear really nicely on the lids, and they do look really beautiful and do have some really great shade options. I think some of the shades are easily duped, to be honest. Even my favorite in here, the Golden Rose, I know a couple dupes of it just off the top of my head. I don't regret buying these shadows by any means, to be totally honest. I do really enjoy them, and I know I will continue to get use out of these palettes, but it's not like life-changing amazing. Like, it's just not something I'm like running out to go purchase more of them. And would I spend $240+ on the large palette? No, probably not. It just wouldn't be worth it to me. If I'm spending that kind of price point on eyeshadows, I would rather go out and get a bunch of like the Makeup Forever Artist shadows, something that for the most part I can actually see in person and swatch and see the quality of before buying. That's just me personally. Like I said, if you're like a complete beauty junkie and you have the money to spend and want to try one of these out, I'd recommend going for one of the more metallic kind of small palettes, something that you feel like you'll get a good amount of use out of. Like I said, I like them overall, but to me they just weren't anything mind-blowing, and I feel like there's definitely some room for improvement on them, and I feel like if they kind of bumped up the quality a little bit with the packaging and some of the shades, I feel like they might definitely be worth the price. It comes to like the more larger palettes, I mean. Yeah, that is just my thoughts. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I really hope you found it helpful. That is the whole reason I do these reviews. I want to help you guys out, hopefully save you guys some money and some frustration. If you guys enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out, and of course subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And yeah, I will talk to all of you guys in my next video. Bye guys! Someplace like Bora Bora or Tahiti or like anywhere in French Polynesia would be amazing, because that's literally just like paradise, or like Fiji or somewhere like that. That's obviously really expensive.